commentaires sur les politiques budgétaires. C'est pour cela que nous pensons qu'il est absolument essentiel d'être plus prudent dans la politique budgétaire et d'être discipliné du côté budgétaire à l'avenir pour ne pas rencontrer de problèmes plus tard. Et puis, enfin, j'aimerais insister sur quelque chose d'absolument essentiel, de revenir aux réformes. Sur le prochain graphique, vous voyez ce que disait tout à l'heure le secrétaire général sur les nouveaux indicateurs de la réglementation des marchés de produits. Pour vous donner une idée, simplement pour abandonner le jargon économique, ça veut dire que nous prenons un instantané de la situation dans chacun des pays pour voir s'il y a trop de paperasserie administrative, trop de tracasseries dans l'économie, trop de fardeaux administratifs, des procédures excessives, s'il y a trop de barrières à la concurrence ou trop de barrières à l'entrée à l'entrepreneuriat, et s'il y a de bonnes réglementations sur le lobbying pour s'assurer que tout le monde vraiment jouisse d'une concurrence égale et non faussée. Ce que l'on voit, c'est que ces 25 dernières années, il y a eu une baisse globalement. On va dans la bonne direction. Il y a eu beaucoup de réformes dans le monde, mais ces 10 dernières années, ça n'a pas tant été le cas. Dans certains pays comme l'Indonésie, le Brésil, la Grèce, il y a eu des réformes qui ont été entreprises, mais la plupart des pays n'ont pas entrepris de réformes. Et les valeurs les plus élevées ici montrent que vous êtes moins propice à la concurrence, plus de complexité dans la réglementation, c'est plus difficile de créer une entreprise, alors que si votre indicateur est plus bas, c'est meilleur. Donc il vaut mieux être en bas de l'échelle sur ce graphique. Et si vous regardez notamment la concurrence, les barrières à la concurrence dans les services, elles restent très élevées dans bien des pays. Ça veut dire que dans beaucoup d'activités de services, il est trop difficile d'entrer dans ces secteurs et de rivaliser avec les opérateurs établis. Et puis on voit aussi qu'il y a trop de barrières à la concurrence et à l'entrée dans l'énergie, les télécommunications et le transport qui sont des secteurs fondamentaux. Ce que l'on
likely will not be able through the lobbying to be in the same level playing field. So, good lobbying regulation is absolutely essential, not only to promote the culture of integrity, but also for competition, to create jobs, to create more investment. So lobbying and accountability of lobbying should be improved in many countries of the world. Why am I talking about so much about these barriers and red tape and so on? What is the impact? What is the real impact, you ask me? Well, I can show in the next graph. The next graph on the left-hand side tells you if you do reforms, if you are in the OECD countries and you want to move to the 5 best OECD best practices in all these areas, you can see that you can have an increase of 3% in GDP per capita over the next 10 or 15 years if you do reform in these areas. If you cut down the red tape on creation of firms, if you lower barriers to service, lower barriers to competition, this is what you get. And if you are an EME, if you are an emerging market economy, the payoff is much bigger. In fact, you can see that payoff to productivity, to growth, and to employment is going to be so significant that growth will go up by about 7% GDP per capita. So it's a significant one. So final word is that reforms pay off. There has been some reluctance of reforms in the past few years. It's time to turn the corner. It's time to go back to reforms. To sum up, we have a picture of growth, of resilient growth. Inflation is coming down. Trade is doing better. And we know that labor markets are easing. So that basically we have a benign picture in terms of growth. But we still think that growth can still do better. In order to do better, we need to revive investment. And we need to make sure that we have good policies. In terms of policy, we think that monetary policy should, there's room to lower rates, but there's room also, it's important to stay prudent. Fiscal policy should turn the corner, and we should go back to fiscal discipline and prudence. And on the other hand, in particular, it's absolutely essential to go back to reforms. And with that, we open for questions. Thank you.
Alvaro, Secretary General, thank you both very much. We are ready to take questions from both journalists here in the room and those watching us on the Zoom. Please go ahead and put your questions into the chat function. Try to get to some of those. Here in the room, first, We have one down here. Just 1 second for a microphone. Please identify yourself.
Ángel Calvo from the Spanish press news agency EFE. Can you precise the risk of the geopolitical risk in Middle East in relation with energy? And can you say why there's a big difference between European countries in the economy just now?
Well, in terms of risk, first of all, I want to remember what has happened since last quarter of last year. With the disruptions in the Red Sea, we've seen an increase in shipping costs all over the world, and in fact, longer routes, but also an increase in shipping costs. Shipping costs went up by 160% in many routes. So we're talking about that, obviously, that is has an impact on trade and has an impact also on prices. But of course, if there's an escalation of the conflict, this would mean that obviously this, these routes and some of the region that is one of the major producers of energy in the world, this will have an impact for sure, not only on trade, but energy prices. That's what I mean by that. Regarding Europe versus the United States, well, why is Europe not doing so well in the United States? For a variety of reasons, but one of them certainly has to do with the energy crisis. Again, the United States was not as affected by the energy crisis that it was as Europe was. But also there's some issues that we think, the structural issues that continue to make the United States a more dynamic economy. And we salute the two reports that came out in terms of single market and competitiveness that I think is going to be quite useful as some of the recipes that I think to make Europe more dynamic. But on the other hand, also important to say that consumption has been a lot stronger in the United States, investment stronger too, and so that is reflected on the growth rates in the United States vis-a-vis Europe.
Thank you very much, Alvaro. Other questions here in the room? If not, I think we'll go to a few that we've got in from journalists watching us on the Zoom. First one is from Carlos Asensio from El Economista in Spain. He says Spain's growth forecasts are among the most improved from the May outlook. What are the strengths of the Spanish economy? Makes it one of the big four of the Eurozone. Why is it growing the most? And what should be done to ensure that these good results are maintained?
Well, Spain, first of all, is witnessing and is experiencing a tourism boom. Spain was always a very good tourism destination, but in particular, it became even more so in the past few months, and so big increase in tourism. Spain is also benefiting from the resilience funds, and so more investment in terms of infrastructure, and also consumption has been fairly resilient. And so that explains why Spain is doing better than other European economies, and we are forecasting Spain to grow about 2.8% this year and 2.2% next year, and so that's what explains it.
A follow-up also from the same journalist asking you about Germany. The Bundesbank says that it may be in recession. The OECD, in its report, does not expect Germany to fall into negative growth. What are the reasons that you think there won't be a recession in Germany?
Well, for Germany, we think that, first of all, we're talking about 0.1%, so we're not talking about very strong growth. We think there are cyclical and structural issues affecting Germany right now. We know that consumption has not been as buoyant as many other parts of the European economy. There's been more savings by German households, and so this is reflected partly in the performance. But also, there are some structural issues regarding some of the exports that Germany has, in particular in terms of manufacturing. And it's not doing as well as was doing a few years ago. And also some structural issues that we highlight is obviously the weakness of the Chinese economy is having some cyclical components and an impact on the German economy, but also the competition in many of the sectors that we see also from markets like China is having an impact on this manufacturing in Germany. But we also think that it's very important that Germany is one of the cases in which we think product market reforms, lowering barriers to services, which are really, really high still, investing in digital infrastructure, and being able to bring more competition in certain markets is going to be fundamental, essential for Germany to grow more. We think that growth potential in Germany certainly right now we are lower than potential. So next year will be a lot better, and we think that it's important to do these reforms to boost investment and job creation.
Thanks very much. Sticking with the questions coming in from online, one from Richard Io at Les Echos here in France. Why are you raising the French growth forecast for 2024? Does it have anything to do with the Olympics? What are the other factors that might have been involved in that?
Well, France is certainly benefited from the Olympics, so there's we can see that there is activity improved during the Olympics. But also consumption in France has been fairly resilient, so this is also helping out. Government consumption also has been fairly strong, and so that's another reason. But that's what explains why we upgraded the forecast in France.
Question from Paolo Levi with the Italian newswire ANSA. What are the main recommendations to Italy?
Well, Italy, first of all, Italy is doing right now relatively okay. So we're growing 0.8%, 1.1% next year, so we're very close to potential. In Italy, we think that is, first of all, fiscally prudent. When we talk about, Secretary General mentioned very strongly, we need to go back to fiscally prudence in many countries. Italy has been fiscally prudent. It's important to continue to be fiscally prudent going forward because the debt level is fairly high. So obviously on fiscal, quite important to make sure that you're able to get some spending efficiencies, you're able also to lower exemptions and be able to raise the tax base. So this is absolutely essential going forward. But also, we've been highlighting for a while that in Italy, regulatory burdens sometimes are too high. Sometimes you have fantastic regulations, but implementation of the regulations is not always there. So implementing some of the reforms that have been done is essential, but also areas in terms of product market regulation, more competition in certain sectors is going to be very important going forward.
Moving on still through the questions coming in online, we have one from Will Horriban with Bloomberg. You've revised the growth forecast for the UK for this year and for next. Could you give some more details on why?
Well, for the UK, first of all, both in Q1 and Q2, so the first 2 quarters of this year was a lot stronger than we had forecast. So this is reflected in our forecast. But also we can see that consumption is doing fairly well in the UK, and inflation continues to go down, and we continue to think that inflation will continue to go down, which will help real income. So fast wage growth will help consumption, real incomes will recover, and as a consequence, we think that growth in the UK is going to be around 1.1 this year and 1.2 next year. But also important to say, one of the areas that the UK needs to improve, and we've been highlighting for a while, but it's important to say that, investment has been subpar in the past few years. And in order to have stronger growth in the UK, it's crucial to have more investment. And how can you invest, or how can you have more investment in the UK? Well, infrastructure. There's a lot of regional disparities, regional inequalities that need to be fixed. There's also a lot of infrastructure that needs to be upgraded, and investing in skills is also crucial. Another area that we highlight in our last survey was that the potential labor supply can increase. What do you mean by this? After the pandemic, more than 1 million people went to inactivity in the UK. And so we need to bring those people back, as many as we can, to the UK economy, to increase the potential of the economy. So we think we like what we see in terms of the childcare reforms that are being promoted to promote more childcare places so that we help the mothers and the fathers go back to work. We also think it is very important in terms of long-term care to help people that are caring for their loved ones at home and they want to go back to work. They're given some support. So, all these labor supply reforms are very important, and it's essential that we are able to implement them.
Alvaro, there's a follow-up on the UK, which has come to us from Lee Thomas from Reuters, and he's pointing out that the UK is seeking to have debt falling as a share of GDP at the end of a 5-year period. And is that the right approach? He's asking. And second of all, should debt that's incurred as part of financing public investment be taken out of that definition? So a follow-up to the previous.
Well, we think that not only for the UK, right? So when we talk about very high debt levels all across the world, or in many countries of the world, it is essential that we are able to reduce the debt burden. So that means that not only in 3 to 4 and 5 years, but what matters is that the debt sustainability is ensured. So the debt trajectory is downwards. That's what we mean, and so that's what we think that is important to highlight. In terms of investment, the UK needs more investment, and so we need to create fiscal space in order to do so, and to be able to have the room to create and to invest in infrastructure that is needed, including also for the green transition.
Also a question from Ali Bektawi with Agence France Presse. He asks you about debt issues. The outlook calls for property tax revenues to be enhanced by countries. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, on that issues, we have several recommendations by countries. It really depends. We try to target our recommendations per country. In certain countries, for example, last week I was in Colombia, and we highlighted that their spending efficiencies in other countries, you have so many exemptions in your VAT that means that you don't have a large tax base. And on the other hand, in other countries also have you tax too much corporations, you don't tax enough either consumption taxes or income or personal income taxes. So we think that is important in several countries to have a balanced approach, try to see what is working and is not working for your own country, and then say, how can we increase the fiscal space going forward?
A question from Valentina Romay with the Financial Times. Do you expect the U.S. to continue to outperform the rest of the G7 countries on productivity growth in the years ahead?
On productivity, in fact, in a few weeks' time, we're going to come up with a new study that shows the impact of AI on productivity. And we'll certainly send that study to everyone. But what this is saying is basically, like it happened in the 1990s, when you have the diffusion of the computer and then the internet, you saw a big increase, boost. It was temporary, but it's a big boost in productivity in the United States. But about productivity, the most important thing is that in the last 20 years, all across the world, we saw a decline in productivity. And you cannot have sustained increase in living standards if productivity continues to go down. In the United States, with the advent and the diffusion of the computer and the internet, you had an increase in productivity. Then it went went back to more or less the same trend. We see now a pickup in productivity. In our study, we'll see that we expect that AI will bring some bonus in terms of productivity. We expect and we hope that this is going to also seize not only in the United States, but also in other parts of the world. So what is important is that we are able to adopt these technologies to our own advantage, and that would allow us to have, in several sectors, boosts in productivity, allowing us to have stronger living standards growth and purchasing power around the world for families and also for firms.
I think we've run through the questions that we had from the journalists online. I don't see anyone else here in the room, so we will end this press conference now. Remind you that all the information for the Interim Economic Outlook is on the OECD website. Thank you very much.
Let's see if you want to